welcome the Utility Committee being here. Thank you so much for that. And to make sure that you can welcome our new Commissioner-elect, Simmons, Dr. Simmons, who is here next to us. And he officially joins us on Monday. And this is our ability to spend some time as a committee, not only with commissioners, but then beyond that with constituency throughout the city that represents all of our utility customers' interests well, and to be a voice for that and to do pre-approvals before the commission with respect to expense spending and those kinds of things that we do as a commission. And we have a great team here that works as the Hurricane Ian recovery shows diligently to provide stable service over a long haul and plans good long-range planning in a very dicey industry that has all kinds of change associated with it and new future opportunities ahead of us, and to do it in a very sustainable, conscious way. And so with that, we can get started. And I would think if you want to maybe do introductions around the room as utility committee members, just so the Commissioner-elect Simmons can know who you are. We start with you, sir.
You know me, Ashley Trout.
Jack English, I met him just a minute ago and shook his hand, so.
And your background, just a little bit about your background, what you've done in the past.
I can't do it in 2 minutes.
Just fast.
All-state agent for 21 years, served on the utility committee in the late 90s, served on the school board, retired from all that garbage, and now I'm just a slumlord. I manage 10 family properties.
It was good until I got to that part. Next.
Sixth Sivan, this is my second meeting, so just joined the utility committee. I've got about 15 years with Publix, 16 years Army National Guard, did a lot of different things. Live outside of North Lakeland, so I just want to participate and help out. So,
Sounds great.
I'm Terry Hamilton. I operate Lakeland Regional and its practices, and I'm here representing large business.
And he can produce his own electricity if he has to in his generators.
We made it through the big storm, through everyone's help here, so thank you.
And how many generators do you have?
We have a lot of generators.
A lot.
We have a lot of generators, but it was great to have them because when the powers we delivered 15 babies during the time of the storm, so you need power to track those fetal monitors so that the mom and baby are healthy. So very important.
Right.
All right, and so that's it on the committee members. Staff, do you want to do some quick introductions?
I'm starting. Thank you. I'm Marisol Lopez. I work for Mike Beckham and all of my AGMs and everyone over at Lakeland Electric.
I'm Mike Beckham, Marisol works for me. I'm sorry, you say you're there, Gina?
Good.
I didn't see Gina down there. Go ahead, Gina.
Okay, go ahead, Mike.
Mike Beckham, General Manager of Lakeland Electric.
And I'm Gina Jacoby. I'm Assistant General Manager for Fiscal Operations.
She works all the numbers to make sure we get it right.
And next to me is our consultant from 1898. He has done a lot of work in the cost of service study that we're going to discuss today. So
He's not that old is the name of the company.
I'm Fawn Tran. I am the Transmission and Distribution Engineering Manager with Lakeland Electric.
Scott Bishop, Manager of Emerging Technology.
Billy Curry, Assistant General Manager, Energy Delivery.
Steve Reinhardt, Plant Manager, Energy Production.
IT.
William Schmidt, IT.
Keeps us going.
I'm Cindy Clemens. I'm over Legislative and Regulatory Relations.
Catherine Lacey. I'm the Marketing Manager.
I'm Corey Bush. I'm the Assistant General Manager of Customer Service.
I'm Tori Bombard. I'm the Field Manager for LE.
That means she figures out what all the fuels are going to be with perfection in advance. That's right. So we can anticipate it. All right. I think that's great. So, Mr. Beckham?
Yes, sir. So our agenda today is 2 items. You're going to get to hear a lot more from Tori and Gina, who you just met. And we're going to talk about fuels and where we stand on that right now, fuel costs. And then we're going to talk about this cost of service study that 1898 has been helping us with for quite some time now and what that means for our rate. Our rates. So it's going to be Tori and then Gina, and then we have a few contracts at the end. So Tori, why don't you kick it off?
It's a good thing to see you. I told you before, if I came to see you, it's not always good. But times are changing. So, what you're looking at here, this is the winter, this is the summer, okay? And energy consumption is measured by what we call either heating degree days or cooling degree days. So anything 65 Fahrenheit below is heating, above is cooling. So what we're seeing here is, we know that October, December, that we might have more consumption, but we are a winter peaking utility. So in January and February, you can see this dark line here is showing that the market is projecting a warmer winter, which means that consumption will be down. And if you recall, this year wasn't just the United States, it was all over the world. It was just so hot. We saw droughts. The heat was just, we didn't have much rain. So we're seeing that from April to September for 23, they're projecting that we're going to have, a cooler summer. So we won't have so many cooling degree days. So that's a good thing in that, it helps us know that when we go to the following slide, storage is based on, if we know that we're not going to consume much, it gives us the ability to know that we're going to probably build more storage. Because when you look up the blue line right now represents how much storage we have. And the gray line is the benchmark. That's the 5-year average, okay? So whenever storage is below the 5-year average, that's what this line is showing you. The red is the price of fuel, and the blue is when this line is either under or above. So that's why we kept seeing these spikes in fuel prices, because our storage level was so low. But if we're going to have lesser consumption in 23, and our production right now, we're seeing in the Permian and the Haynesville, they're beefing up. And hopefully we won't have the constraints that we had in August on our pipelines. Then the odds are that fuel prices will continue to trend down. So if we go to the next slide, that's what you're seeing here, okay? The black line represents what the forward curve was as of October 28th. It changes as I'm talking to you, it's changing. But I can't have it moving when we're talking to you. But what I do is I take the red line and I build in what I think our fuel prices are going to be, okay? And they're based on, right now we're still paying a basis premium. That means I can't buy gas at the lot line even when I want to. We're paying a little above that. It's not too bad. Like in August when we saw $8, we're now at about 14 cents over it. So it's coming down. But the red is where we think the prices could be. But our highest risk months are going to be January and February. I always say there's like 3 really risky months for the utility. August and January and February, because that's when our loads change the most. August is usually the hottest, but January and February, they can be cold months. We've seen fuel prices go up to $20. So the other months aren't as risky. So even though I've built in prices you see here from maybe $7.76 to $7.85, they could be greater, but I have to look at the market right now and saying right now with storage being so high, go back to the other slide if you can go back. I took this as of 1021 and 1028. We're actually going up closer. So we might go over it. So we look. This is a good thing for me, a bad thing for you. When we had that hurricane, okay, because people's power lines were down, we started having record injections into storage, okay, which has helped us really escalate up there. And the weather's been really nice this last week or two, so we've been seeing like 100 BCF a day versus like 40. So we have good odds of this going above that gray line. So if that happens, because remember I talk about
withdrawal season and injection season. Injection building storage is usually from April to the end of October. And then withdrawal is during the winter when we're taking it out. And so that's, from November to March. So we're building up our reserves for our gas that gets us into the winter. So if that happens, go back, that will help us here with the market. And hopefully that's a good outlook. But I'm sorry, if I knew everything perfectly, I'd be a very wealthy lady. But I can only do looking at the fundamentals and looking at, our consultants give us analysis of what we think the risks are. Use that information. So if we go to the next slide, this again shows you, remember the blue line is if we didn't hedge. So you can see October is a very expensive month. That was a record. We spent $40 million just on our fuel budget. And you figure the year before we only spent I think it was $12 million. So it was a big change. But the black line represents what our current fuel rate is. In August, we had a fuel rate of $60. Then effective September 1st, we went to 75. So I thank you for that because we desperately needed it. As you can see, we were nowhere near we didn't have enough revenues. So what we're saying is really from September on, we're going to start over recovering with a fuel rate at 75. But we need to because our reserves are very low. So if we go to the next slide.
Oh, Corey, I'm sorry, Corey, I apologize. Tori, could you go back and do just a summary piece on hedging? It's just to talk about what that is and how it works.
Okay.
One slide back. Goes one slide back.
Okay, so what we do is we put on, in hedging you have ceilings and floors, okay? So when we're looking at the forward curve, every quarter we'll put like a 25% tranche on. We don't do it all at once because you can never time the market correctly. So what I know from right now, from September to this month, I'm 100% hedged because each quarter I put on 25%. From January to March, I'm about 75% hedged, and April to June, we're about 50. So each quarter we put on a little tranche. And so that gives us a weighted cost of capping our fuel cost. What's happened is the Risk Oversight Committee, which is myself, Jana Kenobi, and Jeff Stearns, when the price of fuel was really, really low, like $2.25, $2.50, we pre-hedged out. We can go out to 36 months. And when we did that, we've been able to, even though the price of gas has come up, our hedge cost have been lower than the market. Because normally, you do not make money with hedging. It's an insurance program. You use it to budget so you cap your risk. But in our case, because the price of our hedges have been if you're at $5 price of your hedges and you're paying $15, you all of a sudden are receiving the money back because you've capped your exposure to the upside risk, and that's why we hedged. But as hedging keeps coming, as we keep hedging out, you'll see that the hedge and the market get closer and closer because as we keep putting on those prices, it's closer to the market, okay? But what we're trying to do is minimize the upside, because if we had a run-up, like the hedging program brought in $60 million, we would have had to have that come out of our budget, okay? So it's just capping your exposure so that you know what your costs are. Now, most time hedging will cost you a little premium. In our past, it was like maybe between 10 to 20 cents an MMBTUs, but we knew that it would, that was our risk. But what we've been saying is the reverse. We've been actually receiving money back on our hedging program each month to reduce our cost down. And so that's why if we hadn't hedged in August, we would have had our fuel cost would have been $119 versus the $91.42 because we received money back from our hedge program. And that's what this line is showing. Right now, we're continuing to receive money back. But eventually when I come to see you, they'll be closer together. But remember, the The reason we do it is to cap our exposure to when the market does run up on you.
Which is a $60 million number.
Yes, it was very
That
expensive.
would have been costs for customers to have had to pay and fuel that didn't have to be.
Right. And the munis were able to hedge, whereas the independent utilities, like your Florida Power Light, your Dukes, they're not hedged, okay? So their rate payers are going to have to take it for what the cost is. So, does that?
Thank you, perfect.
Okay, just want to make sure. So I want to show you this slide because what we tried to do, right now I'm projecting the fuel budget to be about $205 million. To try to make this simple, if I take $205 million divided by 365 days in a year, that means I spend roughly about $562,000 per day on fuel costs. So if I take that times 18 days, our current reserve is $10.1 million, okay? And the APPA guidelines are just the best utility practice. You should have between 45 to 90 days cash on hand to pay your bills. Fuel, I spend a lot of money. I spend like 40% of the utilities budget. So we've always tried to be around the 60 days, before when I talked about the 20 million. But now it's just because the fuel budget has increased. Because our ordinance says it's just 15% of whatever your budget is. So you take 15%, and that's where I get this 30 million. If the fuel budget goes down, then of course I would tell you guys we don't need as much. But if it would go up, of course I would come back and say we need to increase it. Because a lot of folks have used to the 20 million, that's where we come up with this 30. So if we go to the next slide, that black line is the 30 million, okay? And so that's what I said. Here in July, we had the $60 fuel rate. Because our fuel costs were $40 million, we went down to below $5 million in our reserves. Now, because of you guys bringing the rate up to 75, I know it was difficult, but we needed it so that we can start over recovering to get where we need to be. So I'm thinking, right around March is when I was telling you that the market should come off because we're seeing that inventory of gas, depending how it ends at the end of withdrawal season. But if we have, the fundamentals right now are just saying that we're warmer winter, better summer. So we're thinking the market, and that's what the market believes, that the price of fuel will come down at that time. So I'm thinking either somewhere in March or February, that's when we would be able to lower fuel cost. And, and we will still be able to, be over recovering. But right now, it's just because we're just at such a dangerous level. Because if something happened in January and February, and we had a spike, then I would under-recover. And we're trying to get back to the 30 million, which is roughly 60 days of cash to pay your bill. So that's what I have. So I'm kind of just saying this is where we're at right now. Are there any questions?
For the watching public, can you remind us again, why is it good for the utility to carry that days in cash?
Why is it necessary?
Why is it necessary? Because the days of cash on hand for the utility would affect our credit rating, which Gina Jacoby could get into. We tried to keep 180 days, and fuel budget is part of that. So if I don't have reserves, then I start going into your base rate, start paying for your fuel cost. Remember, we do not make money on fuel. It's a pass-through. Here's our cost, and that's what we try to make our rates. So, and if the fuel budget is 40% of the whole utilities budget, I can go through days of cash pretty significantly. I told you I spent $562,000 per day.
Tori, is there a scenario where you would see us being able, where you would come and recommend lowering the fuel rate before March?
Yes, there could be. I'm keeping an eye on it. Right now things have been looking really good. It looks like September closed out about in the 5. So if fuel prices go below that red line, remember that was the forecast, and things get even better, then yeah, I would come back. And then that would really be a good thing to see me. But right now, just because where we're sitting, I still would like to wait.
Thank you.
And that because we review that on a monthly basis, it's doable to be able to take a look at that. It's important because when people say, oh, they've just raised our electrical bill again, that we recognize there's been no rate adjustment other than fuel cost. It's always just following the cost of fuel, no different than when you could yell at the gas pump the same way with your car. You know, it's just the cost of the fuel went up. Yes.
The fuel reserve outlook dips in February as far as the reserve goes.
Yes.
Is that because we're going to burn more fuel at the end of the peak period? Yeah.
Well, if you go back.
We're headed up, and then we fall off a little bit. And then when you're proposing the rate change
That's
in
because-
March, yeah.
If you
Why
go-
does the green line go
Go
down?
back to the
in
hedge
February?
valve. I'll show you why. Let's see what you got. Because in March, I'm saying our fuel costs are going to be $76.85, and I was thinking we would reduce the cost to $55, so we won't be recovering as much. But I'm okay there, because when I look at where our reserves are going to be, I'm willing to take a bigger under-recovery that month. March is, it's an off-shoulder month.
Yeah.
Okay.
I got that.
So I'm in this month, you can see our costs are here, but I'm only going to have our revenues here. So I'm really going to go back, I'm going to reduce the fuel reserve. I'll be under-recovering instead of over-recovering. But then, when April hits, because that's when the forward curves, then we'll still over-recover, but just not as fast.
Yeah, I understand that, but
That's why you go back to the reserve. The last
So
slide.
it's because you're projecting
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Even though
we're going to under-recover.
I would start under-recovering, and then once April hits, we'll start over-recovering again.
Okay, and that's, again, reviewed every month. And it's
Right, reviewed every month.
Possibly, that could be a better line than this.
It could be a better line. Remember, all you can do is take a snapshot in time.
Okay.
Any other questions? All right, thank you. So it takes us to our base rate study. Different from fuel update.
This is very different from the fuel update. I'm going to walk you through the first phase of our rate study. There are 3 phases to the rate study, and the first one is determining our revenue requirement. Now, for those of you who've gone through a rate case, a lot of my first couple slides are going to be repetitive, and please bear with me. But what I'd like to do is make sure that everybody's on the same page and understands how rates are made. The revenue requirement basically is what we need to break even on our operations. Now, there are 3 charges. When you look on your bill, there are 3 charges that you'll see on our bill. There's the base rate charge, there's the fuel charge that Tori was talking about, and there's an environmental charge. We are talking, and I'm going to be focusing specifically on the base rate, so the base charge, and that comprises about 45% of the charges of on our bill. So about 55% is fuel, 45% is the base rate. Historically, we've done one of these rate studies every 4 years. The last one was done in 2018. So it's about time to do another rate study. Plus, a lot has happened since 2018. We had COVID in 2020. We shut the coal unit down, and that had an impact on our costs, as well as we're seeing a lot of high inflation recently over the past 2 years. So a lot has changed since the 2018 timeframe, and it's really time to take a look at our rates and our rate structure to determine if we're still in a healthy place. As I said, the study consists of 3 phases. Calculation of the revenue requirement is the first phase, and I'm going to walk you through that in just a second. As I said before, it's the amount of revenue that we need to break even on our cost of operations. So let me walk you through what is included in the revenue requirement. So this is, again, it could be repetitive for some of you, but the revenue requirement consists of, well, let me start again. When we look at what our total cost of service is, we look at it from a cash perspective. We look at what our non-fuel operating expenses are. And remember, I said fuel is separate from the base rate, so that's why we look at non-fuel operating expenses. To that, we add our rate-funded capital investments. That's the investments we make into our infrastructure that are not bond-funded, but rate-funded. Our debt service, which is our payments to our bondholders, our interest and principal payments to our bondholders, as well as what we call internally dividends to the city, but what externally in the utility world is called the payment in lieu of taxes. And let me explain to you what a payment in lieu of taxes is. If we were an investor-owned utility, we would be paying taxes on all our properties. We would be paying property tax to the city on all our properties. This, instead of paying taxes on our properties, we pay what we call internally the dividend, or our payment in lieu of taxes. So this is what this is. That makes up our total cost of service. From that, we subtract out any other revenue sources that we have, and those can include things like cell tower revenue, our investment income, revenue from pole attachments, and as well as surcharges. And once we do that, we come up with our revenue requirement. If our revenue requirement is below where our current rates are, where the revenue is that our current rates generate, that implies we need a rate increase. And conversely, the inverse happens too. If our revenue requirement is less than the revenue that we generate, then that implies that we need to cut rates. So moving on, I wanted to walk you through what our cost of service is to start with, since that's the starting point for the analysis. What we do when we do the cost of service is we take a look at a test year. In 2018, we looked at the 2018 budget as our test year. And right now, in 2022, we're looking at our 2023 budget as our test year. Reason for using 2023 is that best represents what our costs are going to be when the new rates go into effect. And they do take into account the inflation that we've experienced so far. So let me kind of talk to you a little bit about the graph, because it is kind of confusing. What I did was I compared 23 to 2018 to give you an idea as to where our costs have gone. And the numbers above the arrows indicate how much those components of the costs have increased over the 5 years. Now, this is not an annual number. So, for example, the green bar, our O&M costs, our operating and maintenance costs, have gone up a total of 9.3%. That's not 9.3% per year. That's in total, they've gone up 9.3%. So how does that compare against inflation? Well, on the left-hand side, I've shown you what inflation has done so far. These numbers come from Moody's, and they represent actuals through about mid-2022, and then it includes their forecast. And based on all the inflation we've experienced, total inflation over the 5 years has, the cumulative amount is 21.3%. So if you look at once again, our O&M, our green bar, the fact that our costs went up only 9.3% compared to the 21.3 shows that truly we've kept our costs down over the 5-year time period, and essentially, we've been growing at about half the rate of inflation. Now, granted, part of the fact that our costs are down on the O&M side is we did shut down Unit 3. But when I pull the benefit out of shutting Unit 3 down, our costs have increased 13.7% in total. So again, below the rate of inflation, below the 21.3%. So we are holding our costs down, and a lot of it has to do with our personnel, our salary costs, which, interestingly enough, are less in 2023 than they were in 2018. And this is because we focused on productivity improvements as well as cost controls. Salaries make up about 40% of our expenses. And what we've been doing is over the last 5 years, we've been, whenever there's somebody retires or leaves, we take a look at that particular position and determine, is that position needed or not? And so we've dropped our head count over time through attrition. And we've dropped it excluding, and again, I'm excluding the impact of the Unit 3 closure, we've dropped 14% headcount-wise. So that's one of the reasons our costs have remained low and growing at half the rate of inflation. The blue bar represents our capital spending or our capital investments. And as you can see, that's up 24.3%. I've got that in red because that exceeds the cost of inflation. And I'll go into that in a little bit, explaining to you why that happened. Our debt service up 3.6%. Over the 5-year time period. It's up slightly because of the fact that we issued debt for the Rice units that we're currently constructing. And then our dividends, or our payment in lieu of taxes, is up in total 9.5%, so about a third of the rate of inflation. One of the things I did do was I baked in an increase in our dividend rate, and I did this for several reasons. First of all, our dividends are based on our sales, on our load, and our load has grown about 1.8% per year. Inflation has been running, if you average this 21.3, about 5.7% per year. So our dividends, or our payment in lieu of taxes, has not kept up with inflation. The other thing is we take a look, we set our dividend rate based on the median. What we want to do is we want to be below the median of our peers. And we recently took a look at where we stood relative to where our peers were, and we were substantially below our peers. So we raised it slightly. We still remain below where our peers are. And so we still are in a position where our costs remain low, but yet we're closer to where our peers are. We were substantially below, and right now we've brought it up to a reasonable level.
And part of your 9.5% ability to do that is from the 3.6% expense on interest that is lower than it would be for many people if you did not have the Moody's A rating, if you didn't have the reserves.
That's correct. That's correct. So in total, our operating expenses, our cost of service went up 10.9%. And again, that's about half the rate of inflation. So we have done a great job of keeping our costs down overall over the 5-year time period. So let's take a look a little bit about what happened on the capital side. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I think there's questions as to why did it grow more than inflation? And let me kind of walk you through that real quickly. If we assume that our capital has grown at the CPI, the rate of CPI, our inflation would be 7.6 million of the $8.7 million increase in our capital spending. So a big chunk of our capital growth, yes, is due to inflation. However, we've been seeing inflation in excess of the CPI. For example, our transformers and our breakers have been up 40% year over year. Our steel poles are up 45%. Our wooden poles are up 30%. Even our meters, our remote disconnect meters are up 48%. So I'm really actually being conservative by saying that we're growing at the CPI. So, but let's, for simplicity's sake, let's assume that, yes, inflation, it should have grown at the CPI. So what is the difference? What makes up that $1.1 million increase over and above inflation? And it's a variety of factors. As you know, Lakeland's grown tremendously over the past 2 years, and we've spent a lot in growth and in supporting the development that's been occurring both on the commercial as well as on the residential side. About $500,000 of that million is associated with the growth. Now remember, this is $500,000 over and above what would have been normal growth, inflationary growth. The other is T&D reliability. We focused a lot of attention on our reliability of our system. We are currently looking at replacing our worn distribution poles, as well as doing more undergrounding. And we've seen a lot of success. Our metrics have improved dramatically between 2017 and 2021. For example, our, and I'm going to say this incorrectly unless I look at my notes, our SAFE, which is our system average interruption frequency index, that's a mouthful, which measures the average number of interruptions a customer would experience, declined 21%. So from 1.42, that means the average customer would experience 1.42 outages in 17 to 1.12 in 2022. So a substantial improvement in reliability. We did, as you know, close Unit 3, so that should have cut our capital, and it did. But we've turned around and invested that capital in our units, our current units out at the plant, at Unit 5 and Unit 8. And we've invested to make these units considerably more reliable. And let me show you what I mean by that real quickly. On the other slide, I depict our reliability indices for the plant. For Unit 5, which is our base load unit, and is kind of our workhorse, our reliability is measured in terms of an EAF, or equivalent availability factor. That's the amount of time that it's available to run. So if, for example, it's down because of a forced outage or a planned outage, it's not available to run, and that affects our EAF. As you can see, in fiscal year 17, our EAF was 61%, and in fiscal year 22, we're up at 91. So a dramatic improvement in our EAF on Unit 5. That's tremendous. Matter of fact, back in the 17-18 timeframe, Moody's was concerned about Unit 5 and had some concerns about our ability to keep Unit 5 going and now they're not considering that an option or an issue at all. Unit 8 is measured a little differently because it's a peaking unit. It's measured in terms of number of starts. As you can see, in fiscal year 17, the pool did not call on Unit 8 very often. It called on it 37 times. In fiscal year 17, it's grown dramatically over time as its reliability has grown. And in fiscal year 2022, it was called on 148 times. So dramatic improvement again in the dependability of this unit. Matter of fact, this unit has generated more megawatt hours than it has ever generated. So we're very pleased with our performance and with both of these plants. So our capital has been well spent. So now let's get back to what is really at the heart of the matter, which is our revenue requirement. This is the calculation that I went through, I showed you at first. We take our total cost of service, which was 214 million. We subtract out 31.1 million of other revenue sources, remember? That includes investment income, surcharges, pole attachments, revenue from cell towers as well, and other miscellaneous revenues. So we end up with a revenue requirement of 183.1 million. Compare this to what the revenue generated from our current rates is, which is 176.1, we come up with a shortfall of $7 million. So in fiscal year 23, we're falling short to the tune of $7 million. Now, if we had done this analysis 4 to 6 months ago, and we had 12 months to recoup this shortfall, we'd be looking at a 3.75% rate increase. However, due to the timing of this rate study and the fact that we wanted to sync up the increase in the base rate with the lowering of the fuel rate, because we had anticipated the fuel rate to drop around the spring of 2023, we're looking, if we wanted to recoup the entire amount, we are looking at an increase of 7.5%. Now, this places us in a conundrum, and the reason for this is if we go with the 7.5, that makes us look okay for fiscal year 23, but we over-recover in the years subsequent to that. If we go with the 3.75, we fall short in fiscal year 23. So to address that issue, we took a longer-term perspective. And if we take a look at the next slide, we took a look towards from fiscal year 23 out to fiscal year 25 to get a better feel and to get some more clarity as to which option or which options we should select or recommend to you. As I said before, the 7.5 really wasn't palatable. It wasn't feasible because we are over-recovering both in fiscal year 24 and 25. Our days cash on hand look really good, but again, we're over-recovering, and that's one of the reasons for that. So this really was, like I said, unpalatable and not impressive. From my perspective, it was unconscionable to do that to our customers. So we threw this one out completely. This was not viable at all. So we took a look at the 3.75% case, and this one we fall short, as you can expect, in fiscal year 23, but we fell short in fiscal year 24 and 25 as well. And what really concerned me about this case was the days cash. If we only raised rates 3.75% in fiscal year 23 and did nothing in 24 or 25, we'd be looking at a days cash of 175. That's below the floor of 180 that we always strive to achieve. That's why I highlighted it in red. This really concerns me from a rating agency perspective. Now, the answer to this would be we would do a rate case, of course, for fiscal year 25. And we'd be looking, I crunched the numbers, we'd be looking at about another 3.75% rate increase just to break even and to bring this day's cash on hand up to above 180. So in total, you'd be looking over the 5-year time period, a total of 7.5% increase in rates. That was one option, but again, this option from a rating agency perspective had me very concerned. So we took a look at another alternative, and this is one that I want to share with you. We took a look at, instead of raising rates and doing a full-blown rate study every 4 years like we've historically done, we thought we'd do what water does, which is they phase in their rate increases over time. And they approve rate increases, they approve a multi-year rate increase rather than a one-year rate increase. I like this option for a lot of reasons. First of all, our days cash on hand is always above 180 days. So from a financial perspective, that looks good. In addition, the fact that we've got 2.25 each year provides some certainty to the revenue stream. So the rating agencies would like the fact that there's really essentially no risk to the revenue, that there's some certainty to our revenue stream. The other thing that I like about this approach is it sums up, if you sum up the numbers, it's less than what the 7.5 that the prior case had. If you recall, I said if we wanted to bring the 3.75 case, make that reasonable, we'd have another 3.75% rate increase in 25. So you're looking at 7.5% in total versus this 6.75%. So from a customer perspective, we'd be raising rates over the 3-year time period less than we would be with the previous case. And lastly, like water does, this would be, the commission would have the opportunity to tweak these numbers should we perform better than anticipated. And this happens every year during the budget season or budget cycle. Water will come up and say, yes, these rates look reasonable based on our costs. Or if we perform better than our budget and better than anticipated, you could lower the increase from 2.25% to 2%, let's say. And you wouldn't have to do that through a full-blown rate increase. I mean, a full-blown rate study. You could avoid this having to go through my discussions of why we do rate cases and so forth. So you wouldn't have to see me as often. So again, I like this option the best for a number of reasons. I just wanted to close with a look again at our days cash on hand on the next slide, just to summarize. The red line this is kind of a busy chart, so let me orient you towards it. The red line is the target of 180, so that's where we want to be. The horizontal yellow line is really the AA range from 150 to 250. Although, as I said before, our target is 180 because that's where Moody's wants to see us. They don't want to see us below 180. I've got 3 different scenarios. First of all, if we don't do anything, no rate increase. Here's the 3.75% case. And then the third alternative was the phase-in approach. Clearly, if we don't do a rate increase, this is just not viable. I mean, it drops, our days cash drop from 207 this year to 153 in fiscal year 25. So that's not an option. The 3.75%, yeah, that does look a little bit better, at least we're not dropping as precipitously, but again, in fiscal year 25, you're looking at a days cash of 175, so below the 180. And the alternative proposal, we're above 180 the entire time period. And if we do perform better than anticipated, the commission would have the ability to kind of tweak these numbers, the 2.25, bring it down if need be, if we were performing better than anticipated. So I'm From my perspective, that's the one I would definitely select and definitely recommend. Now, a lot of you may be wondering what other utilities are doing. And we took a look at, it was a little bit difficult to get information on what other utilities are doing, particularly the municipals. But Cindy Clements was able to dig through the PSC documents and identify what the investor-owned utilities are doing. And unfortunately, they were all, we couldn't put them on a consistent basis because their filings were different. But as you can see, they went into, in 2021, they went into a multi-year settlement where they agreed to raise rates each January by a certain amount. And again, these are just base rates, I want to emphasize, they do not include the fuel component at all. So FPL, in January 2022, raised their rates $7.30, their base rate, and that's for an average customer using 1,200 kilowatt hours per month. In January 2023, they're going to raise their rates $4.62 for their average residential customer. January 24, $2.65, and January 25, $1.80. So they'll be raising their base rates higher than what our recommendation is. Duke, they're approved to raise rates 3-4% in 2022, 1 to 2% in 2023, and another 1 to 2% in 2024. And then TECO, they did things differently. They, rather than phasing in rates, they took it all at one time. And in 2022, January of 2022, implemented a $19.80 increase in their base rates for, again, an average residential customer. So, again, they're all going to be raising rates come January. We did find some information on two municipals. JEA, I did find some information online, and I've got the source next to the name of each of the municipals. Per the Daily Record, the Jack's Daily Record, in May of 2022, they indicated they were going to raise rates 1.5%. In April of 2023, that's baked into their budget. And Leesburg, according to ClickOrlando.com, they wanted to raise their base rates from 102 to 108, and that's per 1,000 kilowatt hours. They talked about potentially passing a resolution. I went back and looked at their website, and they, in fact, indeed, did raise their rates to the tune of 5.3%, or $6.62 for the average residential customer. So I expect other munis are going to follow suit, and we won't be the only ones that are looking at raising base rates because of the inflationary pressures. Before we finish and talk about questions, this is the first phase of the study. The second phase involves allocation of the costs to each of our customer classes. So then we'll discuss what each, the residential class will look at, what rate increase they'll be looking at, the small commercial, the industrials, and so forth. And then finally, we'll end up with doing a look at our rate design and coming up with how the rate should be set up and structured. And that's when we'll seek your approval, because that is done through an ordinance. But in order to proceed, we really need to get some feedback from y'all as to which approach you prefer. Again, I recommend going the third alternative. But we do need that to do for rate design purposes. We need to get some sort of idea as to where you're leaning.
So 2 points. One is that, and you had it asterisked down the slide, but one assumes the $30 million reserve, which we have to get back to.
That's correct.
As we get going. And the second is that what is your timing on design and allocations in terms of that portions of the study? When would we be taking a look at that, assuming we agree on this today?
Yes.
Talk about
Greg, I'm going to,
So we are, I'd say, over halfway through the cost of service phase already. So we've been loading that part of the model and running our, there's special studies that develop the allocation factors. We'll probably be at a point to start talking with Jean and her team within a couple weeks. So I would say in a month, we'll probably have the results of the cost of service study and roll right into rate design, which we're starting to have conversations on now as far as if there's any new concepts you want to look at in rate design. We want to start gathering the data for that now so we can kind of roll. So probably, factoring in the fact that we're going into the holiday season, I would say we're looking at having this completed in January or February. So with plenty of lead time before any April changes to have the commission time to review things and provide feedback.
Because it would be nice to have all this kind of, if you're doing an April start, working when we're anticipating fuel costs coming down, which Tori is guaranteed.
yes.
And so that's because it mitigates some of that increase timing-wise.
Yes, and we've taken that into account with our timing. And we want to make sure that those two are kind of integrated and go hand in hand.
And that's, think about it, that's a 25% drop in fuel cost with only a 2% increase in base rate. So that's a very
That's a nice
good
offset.
thing for your customers. Granted, they've seen a lot of increase, but in the fuel side. But.
So what are some of your thoughts? Because we're interested in the viability of this proposal. Committee Member English.
The $30 million is a positive. I mean, you've got to have that.
I've got to have that.
If you don't have that, you're not going to get the 184 days of cash.
That is absolutely correct.
Right, you can't slide.
At this alternate 2.25 3-year increase. And I know that we can go back and review it as a committee and then as a chamber every year as we do this. 180, 184, that's really close to me. I'm more comfortable with the 200 number, but I know the ratepayers have got to realize that inflation has hit us, which has trumped a lot of things, but fuel costs have gone up. Statement from Publix a few days ago about their stock performed well, but not as well as what everybody wanted because of inflation. The utility, I think, is performing well, but one question I had with regards to capital spending, there used to be a formulary years ago that you spend in capital what you had in depreciation.
That's correct.
So I didn't see depreciation illustrated.
Yeah.
So can somebody tell me what depreciation, where'd it go? Did you leave?
Yeah, the one issue we have right now with capital and depreciation is we're building the RICE generation, so we're not depreciating it at this point in time.
Correct.
So our depreciation is lower than our capital spend.
Has it been over time, though? Where's it been previously?
Previously, it was the inverse. Our capital was below depreciation.
Okay, so there's no need to be alarmed at the increase in capital because you're making up for the depreciation you didn't offset before.
Well, not setting up any depreciation currently.
That's correct.
You got what I'm talking? You got where I'm at?
Gina's exactly right, and that is something that we monitor on a regular basis. We want to stay at 95 to 100% depreciation to capital, and Ellie's been great about doing that very thing. They've got a couple of things, the RICE engines were planned, or whatever was going to replace 3 was planned, and so we knew that was going to invert. We also had portions of Unit 3 that were still on the books that were going to be, you couldn't reinvest in that. It was being depreciated, but you weren't going to be reinvesting in those pieces of that, so that inverted it a little bit as well, but on average, no, they absolutely have been tying, and we look at that as well as part of the metrics for taking the payment in lieu of taxes, the dividends, shareholder dividend, whatever you want, is where are the rates, in comparison to all of our peers? Are we in the lowest quartile? Are they reinvesting in all the capital? Is the debt within the range for the rating agencies? And is the cash and all of those things go into on our side, which is, Mike and Gina, we're meeting with city manager even this week to talk about that very thing. Are we still on those ranges? So, yeah, that is absolutely being talked about.
Well, once again, that capital is very important, but debt, to me, trumps that. I mean, if you can't borrow at the right dollar because your rating's wrong, then you're just out to lunch. So when you get out of balance and we drop below that 180 days, that's my concern at this juncture.
And that is my concern. That was my concern with the 3.75%.
Oh, yeah, but even with the 184 is just
He's
close.
thinking you're too conservative.
Yes.
Yeah, there's not much wiggle room.
No, there's not.
Yeah.
Other than the fact they perform well.
Yeah, well, again, if Tory gets a spike and we drop from 30 million, once we get to 30, and she has a spike and we drop below 30, that 4-day differential is gone.
And we're not to 30 until September 23, and we're not even really touching it then.
Right.
Yeah.
However,
that's not
if Moody
any
sees the building in that, you'll get some of the mental assent for it.
Moody's will look at it, what they do is they'll look at it every year round. So they don't see what's going on in between. So they just look at a snapshot on September 30th of each fiscal year. So that's why the 30 million is important. Reaching that 30 million by September is important.
Dr. Brosar.
Just to add to what Gina has said, remember too, what they're recommending is a review every year, very similar to what this commission has gotten used to with water wastewater. It's a yearly snapshot that helps our residential and our industrial commercial customers plan for likely increases, but they tweak it up and down every year, working with all of us. And so if in fact that does occur in going into year 2 where we've had to burn down some cash, well, then that's going to be built into what Gina brings to the utility committee and the commission to discuss. And you're not locked into that, whereas the older model was every 4 years, we're going to go look. This may be an additional way that you can protect against that lower threshold for days cash.
Years ago, you used to look at a 10-year forward plan or 5-year forward plan, and now we're looking at quarterly forward plans. So everybody's shortening the time. So to have a 4-year plan to review that's archaic. You got to do it annually. I mean, I agree.
So is Commissioner Reed?
Are you suggesting a 2.5?
I think Gina's plan is good for the first year, but knowing that we have the ability as a committee and then a commission to make a 2.5 or a 2.1 or whatever on the second or third year based on where the economy is and where everything is, I think that is where I'm at more than anything else. Start with 2.25, yes, but in the ordinance, make sure that it's reviewed on an annual basis so that you can tweak it one way or the other. So I'm in favor of the shortened review period and the 2.25 to begin with. But once again, illustrated as 2.25, it's out in the future. You don't know the second, third year.
So would that be a motion to approve?
I'll move that we approve Gina's recommendation.
Proposal. Second. Discussion.
And overall, the 3-year, if we do that, it's only $5.07 increase to the average 1,200 kilowatt customer, which is lower than anybody else's numbers. I mean,
Count the gas.
Yeah. How much?
Diesel.
I run diesel. It's more than that.
Any other discussion or questions on that? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same. Unanimously passes. Great proposal.
Thank you.
Thank you. What's next?
We're done with base rate.
Yeah, this is what you wanted to do by 12 o'clock. We delivered. It's 12 to 6. All right.
Good afternoon. Just a couple of items for you. The first item that we have is a task authorization with Teamwork Net. This is for the assessment of wood utility poles. The PSC, the Public Service Commission, requires utilities to do inspection of their wood utility poles on an 8-year cycle. So currently, we have a contractor that assesses all of our wood utility poles, which is about 58,000 poles, and they inspect 7,500 of those poles per year, and that's Osmos. But out of those inspections, generally about 1,000 of those poles require some type of treatment or restoration or they can't be treated or restored, so they have to be replaced. So what Teamwork will come in and do is actually take those remaining 1,000 poles and do a very in-depth assessment of those poles. And the way they're going to do this is they will do a test run of about 100 with 2 engineers. They'll establish quality assurance, quality control standards. They're also going to do some inputting with regard to making sure that in terms of work orders and to ensure the efficiency of that and the data collection. And so that's going to occur over approximately a 50-week period of time. So this is also done pursuant to an existing continuing contract that the city already has with Teamwork. So pursuant to the task authorization, the total cost is $236,480. That is included in Lakeland Electric's FY 2023 budget.
Move for approval.
Second.
Discussion. Remembering us.
I've got heartburn over this one.
Me too.
If you're going to hire a Lakeland company with people headquartered in Lakeland to do something that we could hire the people to do, why are we doing that? Why can't we hire the folks?
I'm going to pass that on to the folks that do the poles.
And Fong Tran, our manager of engineering here, and she can attest to the fact that in the last, we'll say 4 months, 6 months, we've lost 3 engineers to other companies. Orlando Utilities picked up 1 or 2 of them, and a couple of the others left.
Why?
Different reasons. Some of them were allowed to work from home. That was a big thing for them. Others were higher pay. So we just went out and she's interviewed, her staff has interviewed some folks to try to replace those. But these folks are going to be coming in. Some of them, I think one of them's a student, just graduated UCF, never worked for a utility. It's going to take time to get them up to speed. With the new development that's going on and her depleted staff, to stay efficient with the Osmos pole replacement and not fall behind like we did back in 2017, where we actually had to bring in pipe to get us caught up.
Right.
We felt like this was the best alternative to have supplemental engineering services for this reason.
Well, that's continuing on my heartburn. Is we hired pipe because we couldn't do it ourselves. And if we can't do it ourselves, and then now we're hiring engineers to tell us on the work orders what needs to be done, how it needs to be done, I got some real concerns about hiring contractors to do. When I worked for the school district, we had a guy that wanted to job out everything and didn't want to self-perform. You always get better performance out of the people that work for you than contractors who are getting paid, because the firm that you're hiring to do it also has to make a profit. We're not a profit-oriented entity. So my concern is either we're not paying the people enough to stay on the job, or there's something wrong internally in the system somewhere. And we need to have, my opinion, just a non-affiliated individual, we need to have a review of the needs of the utility from an employment standpoint. From your group, through Steve's group, through Corey's group, through Gina's group, everybody. I hate to hear, I've known guys that worked at the plant for a number of years, and they pulled out and went somewhere else. Now you're telling me engineers are pulling out and going somewhere else. I don't need to hear that. I don't like hearing that people are leaving Lakeland Electric, or leaving Lakeland overall. I was raised here.
in order to see.
And Tiger knows what I'm talking about. You know, it galls me to know that we can't afford to keep people on the job. And we got to hire somebody else outside to come in and do stuff. So I've said my piece.
That's great, that's great.
All I was going to say is I will tell you, we have taken some steps, and we are starting to see some of that turnaround. We're hoping that it's kind of I hate to use this term, but a stopgap to get us to where we need to be. We've hired way more apprentice linemen than I ever want on my TO, because I want it to be about an 80-20 lineman to apprentices for experience-wise. And right now, I'm running about 50-50 or a little less. So we've got a bunch of apprentices. If we can keep those apprentices through their 4-year training, they become linemen, they stay with Lakeland, and we're starting to see that. We've actually we've been running a first-class lineman job for years outside, not being able to attract anybody. So recently, because of some things we've done, I've had 4 good candidates apply. So we look to hire those folks and bring in some more our experience. Yes, I agree with you 100%. I don't like bringing contractors in. Unfortunately, with the new development that's going on, is tying up her engineering staff completely, to where if I don't do this, then the maintenance side goes away, and we have another Ian, and we're not going to recover in 6 days.
Well, I understand, but this is a 50-week contract, so it's a year-long period. So for $200 and something thousand, I don't know what you pay an engineer, but I think you can employ him.
Yeah, I would tell you that, Mr. Curry. My concern is that cost. I don't have the expertise, but the scope of work that's itemized in this for $236,000 just seems to me.
It's not
so help me, walk me off of the ledge here.
It's not cheaper, and the pipe crews are not cheaper either. It's for a 4-man pipe crew annually is $1.8 million.
Before we get too far away from, I want to appreciate that input, Jack. I appreciate those concerns. We had, to kind of answer some of the questions there and give you an idea of where I'm going with this, we had an outflow of personnel back during the spring, and you will remember that, like everything else in our economy, things are volatile, prices are volatile, everything was volatile, and people were offering all kinds of money to lure our people away. Our linemen were leaving for other jobs. They were getting offers from companies that are doing a lot of construction type work. There are other utilities around us that are undergrounding a lot of stuff. They're hiring linemen for periods of time that might not be a whole career. They're hiring them for big jobs with big money. It's very enticing, and they're not that far from here. They could go short distances to do the work, so they weren't getting far away from Lakeland. That was a real concern. We took some measures to calm that down, I think we were successful. I think Joey will tell you, we were successful at holding on to some of our linemen and even having a couple come back. So he's got a lot of apprentices right now, but we've turned that around, and we've got things stabilized right now. We very much want to have our own people doing the work. We've got things stabilized, but in the meantime, we also had explosive growth going on. And I've told groups, I've told Lakeland Electric, I've told some of you, I think, we are not going to miss an opportunity to grow while growth is occurring, because growth comes and goes. So, and I told Joey, he'll tell you, I said, hire whatever contractors you need to keep it. I told our linemen that too. We're going to hire contractors so we don't miss out on growth. So we have been using contractors. It is expensive. Hiring a crew from Pike, as Joey says, it's more expensive than using our own folks. So we're working back in the right direction with that. Joey said people leave for different reasons. People leave because of different working environments, money. They leave for various reasons. And we've had a lot of people, not just in energy delivery, we've had a lot of people leave in other departments for various reasons. It's been very volatile. But we're definitely working toward solidifying that. I've told the group I want a healthy utility. I want a utility that functions within what our mission is in the city of Lakeland. And we need to be looking at that. We need to look at every job within the utility and make sure it is a value-added job that we need to accomplish that mission. That mission to me is we need to start looking toward the future and understanding what the future utility looks like. We know it's a lot more distributed energy resources, a lot more batteries, a lot more solar, a lot more things, smart grid, a lot of those kind of things, which we're looking at doing. And energy delivery, emerging tech, customer service will be right in the middle of those things, and we need to be moving toward that. I think we have the opportunity to have some really exciting jobs in Lakeland Electric, moving toward that kind of an energy future, as opposed to the what are probably unfortunately going to be the old days of big power plants, pumping power out to the grid. We have an opportunity to do that, so we got to get our folks, and we want to get our folks excited about being a part of that and keeping them right here in Lakeland. So there's just a lot of dynamics that we've been dealing with. I think we do have things fairly well stabilized right now. We are moving back toward having our own expertise in-house to do things, but we're going to have to pay, and we've gotten there across, you guys have, we've gotten there across the board 5%, and that's very helpful. We've got with the merit increase, that's been helpful. There's a salary study that's ongoing right now, and Lakeland Electric has given our Gina's been working on that too, among her many other hats that she wears. We've been giving input to the folks doing that salary study of which jobs we think are the most critical that we really want to focus on. So we're taking steps to try to stabilize that. In the meantime, I know it is unpalatable to spend a lot of money with a contractor if you get people that can do it yourself, but we're still in a little bit of a transition period, and we're probably going to have to do some things like this for the short term so we can get the function done. It's a very critical function that we need accomplished, and we're probably going to have to do some things like that for a while yet until we can build that expertise back up in-house.
Well, and the priorities are right, so no arguments with any of that. To me, on the task authorization, do we have a competitive vote on this?
Well, there are continuing contracts that are established. We already have the continuing contracts. The whole point of that is to avoid having to go back out and then use the contractors that have the expertise to do the work and then issue the task authorization, particularly based on need.
But this is engineering. I mean, this is looking at, this is not doing the work. So this is $236 a poll that I look at.
Just to write a work order. Determine what it needs to have.
I just got to tell you, that just doesn't fit for me. And without a competitive quote. And maybe I'm just being penny-wise and pound foolish.
So we are already in phase one of this work, and they are working on the first 45 polls. And the challenge with not continuing with this, if we get a new contract, a new consultant firm to do this, is we'll have to train them from the beginning. So they've been on sites using our internal resources to train them because they design a program, our maximum, very complicated. Those are very complicated applications. Each utility operated differently. So just because you have experience with distribution designing doesn't mean that you can walk in and do a work order right away, design the job and do a work order. And we have our own standards, engineering standards, that are different from other utilities too. So to start from the beginning again and train other consultants to do this work, that will be a waste of our resources that we've put in so far. And Tim Worknet had recently hired a retiree from Lakeland Electric, and he knows our standards, and he does help out with training Tim Worknet employees so that they don't have to use a lot of our internal resources. So that's where we're at right now. And this is a hard one for us too, because for a long time, we've had the luxury of having people and we're able to keep them for 20, 30 years. But the baby boomers, they retired. That was like the beginning of all this wave. And then we had COVID hit. And some of them, one of them passed away because of COVID and all these other factors. Over the last 3 years, we've had to replace technicians. Engineers just hit us lately, but mostly technicians. We hired them, and then and then we'll have more people retire, and then also maybe, and then some of them do actually leave for other utilities and all that. We haven't experienced this in a long time. And this is like the very first time that we actually looking at hiring consultants to do what we could do in-house all these years. And myself and my entire group are having a lot of heartburn over this, but we just have too much work. We're keeping up with new development. And over the last few years, I've had to allocate resources where, okay, we had a maintenance group with technicians, and I've asked them to, just delay the upgrades, delay the maintenance, and Osmos is part of that. And we've always had a surplus of 500, 400 work orders in the queue for the crews to work. Now we're reaching to where the crews do not have Osmos work orders to work anymore because we have put all of our resources in new development and in other critical reliability needs. So that's where we're at, and that's why we have to do this. We don't want to hire outside contractors if we don't have to, but
So with respect to, just to filter my own comments, I have great appreciation for that. I think we should be doing what's growth-oriented. I think there probably is a premium that we have to pay sometimes for expertise that's higher than we'd like to have it be. When a task authorization gets to be this strong in numbers, and we know we're training some new people on their team with people that used to be here as well, which don't work for us now, but we're training and building and giving them a strong authorization like that. This amount of dollars to me probably represents something we ought to get.
Mr. Mayor, to your point, though, and what you're saying, when we negotiate, have our continuing contracts, part of having those is that the rates, the hourly rate, all that stuff is already negotiated as part of that.
Okay.
So anytime we utilize a continuing contract and issue a task authorization, those rates are established up front. And that's how we, when we come to the commission for recommended short list of continuing contracts or that you approve, and then we always say we come back to you depending on what the delegated authority amount is. If it's over $50,000, it'll come back to the commission for approval. So you will see task authorizations sometimes that are high, and I completely understand what you're saying, but those rates are negotiated at the time we have. I don't know if that answers a little bit of your question.
I wouldn't want Mr. Curry to think of us being anything but supportive of getting that done.
I agree with everything that's being said. I don't like it either, and Fong and I have had these conversations. They have never supplemented engineering at Lakeland Electric in 100 and how many years now? 18?
Yeah, in a long time.
So it's new for them. We've had contractors and line crews in the past when we've had big jobs. That's nothing really new. But to bring in engineers and engineering consulting firms on our CCNA list that Ramona was referring to, typically that list is the top 15 are production engineers, and then there may be one or two firms that get on there for supplemental, but they're never used, so they don't bid on it. This year, Fong and some others sat on that committee, and I think the top 20 are T&D engineers. But the problem with the cost, and I agree, it sounds ridiculous, that price. To Mike's point, there's a lot of construction going on, and these engineering firms are in high demand. So we're basically at their mercy, and they are competitive, and they're local, which is another benefit. It is, local employees and people that spend their money in Lakeland. So I don't like it any more than y'all do, but we got to get the work done. So,
Commissioner Reed.
Thank you. I think a couple of years we discussed pole replacement too. I know we decided to do those more of those in-house too. Is that we still hire an outside contractor to do pole replacement?
we still have the pipe contract crews. I have actually two contract crews that are doing Osmos pole replacement. We were backlogged for so many years, and we've gotten back up to where we should be, although this new Osmos inspection is probably going to dump out a bunch more on us. But yes, to answer your question, yes, sir, I still have our crews that have availability in time because of the contract that we have with the UWA. I cannot have contract crews in here without allowing them the opportunity to work on their days off to do Osmos Pulse. So they typically will have 15 15 to 18 guys sign up on a Saturday to do an 8-hour or 10-hour shift on Osmos poles.
There's a motion on the floor. We'll go back to the table. How any other comments you'd like to make as committee members on this? All right, this is a voice vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same? One. All right, and so that's good. And I appreciate that, asking the questions, I really do. And it's good. All right, next item.
The second item that we have is an agreement with Plant and Power. This is for Larson Unit 8 outage contractor services. Unit 8 is currently in its fall outage, and during this time, the repair work that's needed is to replace the evaporator piping and economizer tube sections, as well as conduct some inspections related to that. Those are critical for the steam generation, and we've noticed some repeated failures over the last few years. The purchasing department issued a bid seeking qualified contractors. We actually had two contractors that bid on the work. One was Plant and Power that came in at $132,652. The other one was Mid-State Industrial Maintenance that came in at $247,833. You have to notice a huge price discrepancy, and I know I asked that question as well, and I knew Mr. English would have that question.
Thanks, Ramona.
Try. But when I asked staff and followed up with staff, part of that huge difference was the mobilization costs related to that, which was from Mid-State was $148,000 for mobilization, because in their mobilization costs, they included a full-time project manager, a full-time quality assurance, quality control representative, and safety representatives, which all added to the cost, which were not necessarily required by the specifications. So that was what was the price differential. And whereas Plant and Power had mobilization costs, which could range from between $30,000 and $37,000. So that answers that question with regard to the price discrepancy. So Plant Power was selected as the lowest, most responsible bidder. They'll conduct all the services in accordance with the bid specifications. That total cost of work is $132,652, and that's included in Lakeland Electric's FY23 budget.
Is there a motion to approve?
Sure.
All right, and second?
Second.
The comments again, if we had trained welders, we're supplying the scaffolding and everything else. We're supplying the materials. It sounds like a labor-only contract.
This is material, equipment, labor, all of that is part of this.
Any other questions or discussion by anybody else on the committee? None. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same. Unanimously passes.
The last contract item we have is an agreement with Optimus Industries. This is for replacement of the rotor air cooler for Unit 5. This is cools the rotor air cooler. Rotor air cooler. Excuse me.
None of us could say that.
The compressor discharge before returning it to the turbine, and it cools the rotor. This particular piece of equipment has been in place for 20 years, and it's reached the end of its useful life, so it's in need of a replacement. The city's purchasing department approved Optimus, which is the original equipment manufacturer of the rotor air cooler, as a sole source vendor for the replacement. Upon your city commission's approval, they'll begin the engineering and fabrication. There is a long lead time delivery with regard to this, so delivery is not anticipated until December of 2023, and then the installation will actually be done in spring of 2024, which will be installed by Lakeland Electric staff during the spring 2024 outage. The total bid price that Optimus provided was $1,061,707. However, as we've seen with a couple of contracts that we've looked at, staff wanted to build in a 5% contingency amount, because by the time this was approved, between the bid and the time it's improved, and because of the long lead time, that contingency amount is $53,880. $53,085 was added to that bid price, and so the total cost is $1,114,792, and that is included in Lakeland Electric's FY23 budget as well.
Motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Okay.
Second.
And a second. Discussion.
Their contract, though, says they can go 25%.
25% of what? What's your
Increase.
question?
Contingency?
Increase.
The prices are firm for a period of 30 days. I think we received the proposal October 28th through 11/28, I believe, of November. This is firm, but if the pricing can go up that amount.
That's provision 23.3. You're right. A markup of 25%.
So you may come back with
If it exceeds the contingency amount, but
Right.
we are pretty
But
confident
they have the
that it would
ability,
be.
based on their contract, to go up 25%.
They could.
We're only throwing in a
but
5% contingency.
We're including the 5% contingency.
And this is in the budget as stated, so. Other questions or comments?
Sorry for reading the contracts wrong.
I like the contracts.
She just did. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same. Unanimously passes as well. Okay, so, any other items, sir?
No other items, but I do appreciate your careful consideration of all these items, but in particular the rates, the fuel rate and the base rate. Really appreciate your consideration of that. You all are very thoughtful and put a lot of thought, ask good questions, and that's very important to us. It's very important to the customers. So I'm very thankful to the committee and the commission for doing really good due diligence on our rate case. Thank you.
And we are appreciative of your work, and we want you to make sure that you know that. All right, thank you. You guys are a great team.
Thank you.
Any other closing comments? All right, seeing none, we are...